I'm Linda Brown. I was a teacher for a very long time before I retired. Half of my life doing adult literacy and the other half public high school teaching. And I joined Occupy because after the 2008 crash, lots of us were saying to ourselves and to each other, well, if people aren't out in the streets now, when are they going to be out in the streets? And then all of a sudden Occupy was out in the streets, and I could not have been happier or more excited. And it seemed to me that whatever they were doing, I had to go join.
You guys just started this book. You came out with a book, Occupy Finance. How did that come about?
It came about because we've been meeting now for over a year, almost 2 years. And we set ourselves two tasks. One is to try to understand what was going on in the financial industry, and the other was try to spread as much as we could what we had learned. And we also, on the first anniversary of Occupy, Strike Debt came out with an absolutely wonderful manual called the Debt Resisters Operations Manual, which we thought was just the most extraordinary publication. Serious, radical, and well-researched and wonderful. And we thought we should try to do the same for what we've learned about the financial system and what has gone so terribly wrong.
So over the years, how has Wall Street crept up on Main Street, and are we doing better because of it?
What is the name for that kind of question where you know what the answer is going to be in advance? Well, let me just say personally, I was always aware of Wall Street, and I was always aware that there were some people who traded stocks and bonds and some people who made really an extraordinary amount of money. But it was always sort of in its box. There were other parts of your life. You had your job, you had your family, you had whatever else you were thinking about. And suddenly, I should have noticed this, suddenly about 2007, I became obsessed with what are hedge funds and what do hedge funds do? And, that you couldn't avoid, after, 2005 or so, or maybe 2000, you couldn't not hear about what was happening on Wall Street. That not only was it taking a bigger and bigger chunk out of our lives, but it was a bigger and bigger chunk out of people's consciousness. I mean, people like me started following the business. I never had followed the business news before. I was in teaching. Why would I do that?
So can you give some examples on how our life has become financialized?
Okay. I would say the one that strikes to my heart, since I'm from education, there are two. One is the complicated financing of charter schools. So charter schools are nonprofit, and they're available to public school students. However, the management companies, the people who are in charge of running the charter schools, are not nonprofits. So we are basically paying public money to these private entities. There's also an enormous part of the rush to test everybody has to do with the companies that make the tests, that grade the tests, that have all kinds of decisions in relationship to the tests. And then, of course, the third thing is how regular people can't afford college. They just can't. Normal families, with 3 kids just can't afford college, and the kids wind up with these overwhelming debts. So in all of those cases, private business interests have moved in on what we used to think were sort of normal, regular public goods.
Things are becoming more and more abstract and more complex. How are people supposed to keep up with all these financial terms and strategies?
That's a great question. And, I think you have to, before you start investigating, you have to develop a stance. You have to sort of say to yourself, people who want to be understood can be understood. Very complicated things can be explained. I was a teacher, not that I had to explain terribly complicated things, but if you want to, you can make nanotechnology or microbiology or genetics or astronomy. You can explain it in such a way that people can grasp it. If you have a sector of your society that the majority of people find absolutely impenetrable, that's not a, that's not by accident. It's so if you develop the stance that many things are made obscure deliberately, but you do have to put in some work. You do have to actually start following the business news, start reading the occasional article, not every article, the ones that are related to something that you know something about. Watch programs on PBS, listen to things on radio stations that you trust. You can start to get a grasp.
What exactly happened during the real estate crisis, and who was responsible?
Oh, I love it that you're asking me this question. And I love it even more that I'm going to take a shot at answering it. My understanding of what happened in the real estate crisis was that once banks no longer kept the mortgages themselves, once they could put a whole group of mortgages together and sell them as a security, well, they could make money from doing that. And the people associated with it, the mortgage brokers, all kinds of other people could make money doing that. So, of course, they wanted to keep making that money. So rather than investigating whether or not the mortgages made sense or people could pay them back, there was this incredible drive to just have as many mortgages as possible so that you could turn them into securities, which created the real estate bubble, which certainly contributed to the crash. I know that there are people who will talk about why they're going back even before that, even before securitization, and the fact that there was so much money that was looking for a place to invest, that there was sort of a lot of free-floating money around, and the people with that money glommed onto real estate. But you can see that the bubble was created and then was fed. And then the truly astonishing part is the people who did it got taxpayer money that can't be used to send people to college, to repair bridges. I mean, that really is an astonishing story. People worry about taxpayer money paying for Obamacare. Taxpayer money paid for bonuses for AIG and bank executives after they had crashed the economy. It astonishes me that people aren't outraged every day about that.
Can you explain in simple terms what securitization is?
I will try. Securitization is when you take one kind of asset and you turn it into another kind of asset. So with mortgages, for example, you go and you borrow some money from the bank and you have a mortgage and the bank has the mortgage. Well, the bank doesn't want to just wait for you to pay the mortgage. It might be a 30-year mortgage. So what the bank does is it takes a whole group of mortgages and sells them to a financial firm. The financial firm then repackages them as securities, which it sells. So the original financial product was a mortgage, but the new financial product is a security. They've taken your mortgage and a whole bunch of other mortgages, and they've turned it into something that they can sell pieces of. And they don't just do it with mortgages, of course. They do it with all kinds of other loans and all kinds of other things.
That doesn't seem to be in the best interest of the people, of the 99%. How come there is no law against that?
And this is the most interesting thing. How do our laws get written? How much oversight do we have over the laws that get written? And when laws have not been written to help regular people, how can we change them? And that's really huge. And I think, going back to what you asked earlier, part of the problem for regular citizens is the complexity. And so people don't people feel, yes, I have a sense that it's wrong and it's corrupt, but I have no idea what I could possibly do about that.
In the long term, can this whole financial system survive?
Who? Who knows? I mean, we've all read or learned in our history books about the rise and fall of empires. It certainly can't survive the way it is now that I can imagine, because the next big crash is just waiting to happen. We haven't created laws to prevent what happened in 2008. And a lot of the traders are doing exactly the same kind of stuff that they were doing before. So, and these days, a financial crash is a worldwide crash. It's in Greece, it's in Spain, it's in Italy, it's everywhere, So it seems to me that unless we really seriously decide to get a grip, I don't see how it. I think we're living in a dream world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talking about that, what happened to the American dream?
Well, I'm an example, okay? I worked for public institutions, so I have a teacher's pension from New York City. I worked for the city university, so I had part of a pension through the city university. I live in a rent-stabilized apartment. It is astonishing to me. I went to decent public schools when I grew up. I was able to go to college and pay back my loans. So I am, they talk about the greatest generation. I'm the luckiest generation. It is amazing to me how all of these pieces came together. And I'm sick at heart to think that people of your generation and the people younger than you, those seem so out of reach. People are fighting to take away public pensions because people no longer have private pensions. And it's perfectly understandable that somebody working at a corporation would say, hey, why should I be paying my taxes so that you can have a pension when I have no idea if I'm ever going to be able to retire at all? It's understandable that we would be turning on each other. But the American dream, people still talk about, but I would say more and more people feel trapped and are just hoping not to be homeless.
I've heard the phrase going around, poor people are invisible. What is meant by that?
Actually, I know myself what it means. I live in a nice neighborhood in Brooklyn, and probably the only way I see poor people is I take the subway. But when I visit people I know in Florida, they live kind of out in the country. Everywhere we go, we're in their car. We meet people who are like them, at nice restaurants they absolutely never have to encounter anybody who's poor. And so it's understandable to me that there are large swaths of the country that really think that some people are exaggerating.
Or they blame them for what's going on.
Or they blame them. But I have more faith in Americans' humanity than that. That I think there is one kind of propaganda is that we are all selfish. I think most Americans really aren't. And if you're a New Yorker, a normal thing to talk about is September 11th. And the weeks after September 11th, the outpouring of everything, of money, of workers not expecting to be paid. And there was a wonderful piece that Stephen Jay Gould wrote saying, we talk about humans' destructive impulses, but really our main impulse is to try to make things better and to try to fix it if something's gone wrong. I think that's true in this country. I still think it's true in this country. I think we're encouraged to be as selfish as we can be, because now we say, who's going to look out for you? Nobody's going to look out for you. But I don't think that's who we are.
Can you explain what due diligence means?
Probably, that's a legal term. And I would assume that it means that you, for example, if you're going to give a loan to somebody, you check to make sure that what they're going to buy is not going to fall into a sinkhole tomorrow. That, in other words, that it's, a reasonable investment, and that they can reasonably pay off what they are borrowing. That it seems to me that, in other words, what your responsibility is, you should take care of.
So this is what's happening. Like, they blame the American people for what is going on, for the crisis.
Right,
Correct.
right. Rather than the fact that they had robots signing papers and, basically they specifically didn't want to investigate. It's not a question of due diligence. It's a question of lots of people in the mortgage business knew that it was shaky and tried to tell their bosses and higher ups and anybody who would listen, this deal really smells. But of course, if you're likely to make thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on a number of these deals, you don't want to know. There's some fabulous quote about, it's amazing how someone can refuse to understand the basics of his salary depends on his not understanding them,
Right. What are the connections between how money is made and what is happening in our society, and how has the financialization of our society affected our values, our politics, our environment, and our lives?
I recognize that line. One of the things that's amazing to me is my mother said, no matter where you are, there will be people who are richer than you are and people who are poorer than you are. It's fine with me that there are people who are richer than I am and a lot richer than I am. But the amounts of money that are made, particularly in the financial and corporate spheres, are so astounding that they have to have they reshape things. In other words, it just pulls everything out of any kind of normal relationship. So it reshapes politics by how much money people can contribute to campaigns. As many people have said, the Republican presidential campaign was kept going for so long with so many candidates because individual billionaires decided to bankroll particular men rather than it being a grassroots, okay, we really want to hear what Rick Santorum has to say or what Newt Gingrich has to say. This has come from us, the people. No. It comes from, a few well-placed, very rich people who managed to reshape really what it is we're thinking about and how we think about it. So that much money. And not only that, one of the heartbreaking things to me is what percentage of young people now still want to go into finance. I remember reading something like in the 1970s, maybe 25% of Harvard's graduating class wanted to go into finance. And now it's well over 50% or 60% or something like that. Because perfectly decent young people say to themselves, all right, let me see if I can make 500 million by the time I'm 30 or 35 or so. And that doesn't seem like an amazing thing to say. Back in the day, people would say, I'd like to be a millionaire by the time I'm 40. These days, people look at Mark Zuckerberg or somebody else and they think, I'm smart, I'm creative, I should be able to make enormous amounts of money while I'm young, and then I'll do good, and of course, that hardly ever happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to be late for Tamir.
I know. One more question. What's going to happen? Where can we find this book that you go through?
It's online. Right, and I hope you have the, I should be smart enough to say what the address is to find it online, but I'm not.
Don't worry about it.
I don't
I'll write it
remember.
down.
You need to. So the book is online, and if you send us a request on our website, which I do have here, which is alt.banking.ows@gmail.com, we'll send you a hard copy.
Really? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.